afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for this gracious opportunity. I am deeply humbled and bring greetings for all of you on this occasion of World Health Day. We have illustrious leadership of Nagpur IMA today joining us, Dr. Archana Kothari and Dr. Rajesh Savarbandhe. Uh, Dr. Sushma Thakre, who is a convener of the program that is being organized today. Then we have four distinguished speakers and panelists to deliberate on the theme subsequently, which includes my two teachers and two friends. My two teachers are Professor Narlawar and Professor Zadhav, and two friends who have joined as illustrious speakers include Dr. Sanjay Deshpande and Dr. Subhash Thakre. It is such a pleasure and privilege to be in such a galaxy of company. Esteemed members of Nagpur IMA, invited guests, luminaries from the field of health sector in Nagpur, and ladies and gentlemen. It is really a happy moment for me to share some thoughts in the context of the theme that has been chosen by the World Health Organization for the 7th April 2021, and that is let's build a fairer, healthier world for everyone. And why I'm saying so, that why I'm so happy and delighted. You can see the logo of PHFI, the organization for which I work, on the screen at the bottom. And if you can read the four words that are presented as a part of our logo, includes knowledge, action, impact, and equity. Let me explain this and begin my deliberations in the context of equity. Research is merely a tool that we all know. What ultimately benefits to the society is the knowledge. And when we deliberate on knowledge, we generally has two important aspects. One is knowledge generation, and another is knowledge translation. Knowledge generation gives you the thrills of discovery, but knowledge translation gives you a satisfaction of purpose being fulfilled. And therefore, moving from knowledge to action is extremely important in public health. Only generating knowledge is not going to help. How do we apply that knowledge in the context of action in public health programs is critical and important. Not only the application is important, but its impact is important, because we wanted to see that how it benefits to improve the health outcomes in the population. And therefore, moving from knowledge to action, the next step is basically to see that it is impacting the health outcomes. But only impact on health outcomes will not be sufficient unless it also addresses the equity. Because equity remains at the hallmark of this whole philosophy of public health interventions and approaches. And therefore, I wanted to mention clearly that why I'm so happy, because we promote moving from knowledge to action and action to impact and impact to equity. And that's the reason that I thought that I should mention this as part of the logo initially. What I'm going to do next half an hour or so, first 10 minutes or so, I will deliberate on dissecting and deciphering the theme, that we need to first understand what does it mean, and then throw some light on issues related to equity. But having talked about equity, it is also relevant to continue our discourse on how do we respond to these inequities? What are the strategic interventions that we have to respond to these equities? And with reference to that, I would speak on two important initiatives, that health system strengthening and multi-sectoral interventions, and how do we use them in addressing equities. Moving further forward, in last 10 minutes, I would like to deliberate on two strategic approaches that globally now being promoted and also are targeted towards reducing inequities in the populations, and those are health assurance and sustainable development. That's the scope that I have articulated for myself. Let's begin the first part of this discourse and disquisition, dissecting and deciphering the theme. We have to read between the words. The theme is let's build a fairer, healthier world for everyone. I have divided these few words in three categories that you can see. We have to create a new world for 21st century. We have to build a new world for 21st century. But the focus that has been identified is that this world should be fairer and healthier, which actually incorporates the whole philosophy of social justice. And therefore, we need to understand what does it mean when we say fairer and what does it mean when we say healthier. And the last bottom word that I wanted to mention is the universality of this particular theme, which tells us that this is for everybody. This is not only for a selective privileged population. The whole idea is that how the have-nots, disadvantaged population is being taken care of. But let's begin first aspect of that, fairer and then healthier. Why fairer world for everyone? Why do we talk about fairer world for everyone? Last few decades or so, I would say 2 to 3 decades, several countries have seen very rapid economic growth, migration, urbanization, which created opportunities for better lives for several population groups across the globe. But we also know, we also realize there are others who are left behind. And therefore, the context of being fairer and how do we get them along is more important. Let me elaborate briefly on and in the context of COVID-19 pandemic, because this is an extraordinary and brilliant example because we all have experienced that. COVID-19 has impacted our life in all kind of spheres, which has resulted into undercut recent health gains that we have, in last couple of decades or so have been able to move forward in terms of even life expectancy, reduction in infant mortality rate, and so many other critical health indicators. It has pushed more people into the poverty and food security globally. And more importantly, it has amplified, because we are aware that gender, as in the context of social health and gender inequalities, there are challenges globally. But these challenges of gender, social, and health inequities are amplified by this COVID-19 pandemic. And we need to realize that history is more than the path left by the past. It influences the present and can shape the future. And therefore, leveraging from this COVID-19 pandemic remains critical for all of us. But although the theme mainly focuses on health inequities, I always felt that we may not be able to really distinguish or avoid the overlap between gender, social, and health inequities. We cannot talk them in independent compartments and buckets. They influence so much each other. And therefore, we will have to really see that when you talk about health equities, also the gender and social equities are addressed. A few months back, I wrote in a Financial Express this article, which eliminates the idea of eliminating gender gaps, which is key to the better public health. I wanted to re-emphasize, and this is before the theme has come into the picture. It was written somewhere in September, a few months back. Wanted to connect the social and gender inequities related to the health equities. And the point I'm making here is that we should not talk and we should not deliberate on these inequities in isolation. To continue to understand why fairer world for everyone is important, is this COVID-19 pandemic has also shown us that its impact has been harshest on those communities. Which are those communities? The communities which are already vulnerable, those who are disadvantaged populations, who are more exposed to the disease, less likely to have access to the quality healthcare services, and more likely to experience adverse consequences as a result of the measures implemented to contain this pandemic. We all know that rich and poor are equally susceptible to the COVID-19. COVID-19 contracting infection has not spared and differentiated between rich and poor. But once the disease is contracted, then the impact of COVID-19 on the poor families is such devastating, catastrophic, and significant as compared to a richer families in several parameters is the point that I wanted to mention here. Therefore, we need to look at it, how do we make this world more fairer? Our world is an unequal one, which is the truth and which is the reality. And not only that this is unfair, but more importantly, it is preventable. And something which is preventable, to allow that to exist is absolutely inhuman. And from that point of view, this World Health Day actually exposes to calling for an action to eliminate health inequities. That's the integral part of this particular theme. And therefore, World Health Organization has clearly outlined its recommendation. We urge leaders to monitor health inequities and to ensure that all people are able to access quality health services when and where they need them. This is also very much integral part of WHO's constitutional principles. If you look at the constitution of WHO, it is clearly articulated. The enjoyment of the highest attainable standard of health is one of the fundamental rights of every human being without distinction of race, religion, political belief, economic or social conditions. So this very much aligns with the very fabric, fundamental constitutional principles of the World Health Organization. But let's ponder on some of the issues related to equity to understand what does it mean. It basically refers to all people having the same opportunities. See, every word is important. It is applicable to all people having the same opportunities to survive, develop, and attain their full potential. And therefore, fundamentally, it speaks two things. One is fairness and opportunity, a fair chance of every individual to survive in this world, to develop to the best of the potential that we possess, and attain that full potential is what the equity is expected to have understanding. But at times, we synonymously use two terms, equality and equity. And I'm sure some of you must have seen this picture, which is a very popular picture. But I use this picture to demonstrate, to differentiate between our understanding about equality and equity. You can see on the left side, rather I would say that these are the three brothers who went to watch a baseball match. On the left side, you can say that as a principle of equality, equalness, everybody is provided with, suppose, one box so that they can stand on that box and can watch the match. But you can see that the younger one is not able to have a view of the baseball match. But on the right side, with the principle of equity, the younger one deserved two boxes and he is provided with the two boxes. And now he is standing on two boxes. And all the three brothers are able to watch the baseball match. That's the principle of equity. It's very simple picture to demonstrate and differentiate between what equality and equity is there. Because at times we believe that if we equitably distribute something to everybody, it serves the purpose. Probably it serves a partial purpose. To serve a complete purpose, probably we need to do a need assessment and who need more to be provided more. And that's the principle of equity is all about. Now let me ponder on two important issues related to inequities globally and nationally. And let me make a problem statement of inequities in both global and national context. Suppose, I will give a few examples because of the time, we'll not get into deliberate on, in more detail, but at least few examples. Suppose we are in a Sierra Leone. You will count 21 women in Sierra Leone to find out of those 21 women, one will die of a maternal mortality. So one of 21 women will be attributed to a childbearing maternal death in the childbearing age, death resulting because of the maternal mortality. But if you move to any typical European country for that matter, say example of Switzerland, you will have to count 17,000 women, and then you will find that one woman is dying because of the maternal related deaths. So comparison of 1 in 21 in Sierra Leone versus 1 in 17,000 tells us about the inequities and disparities between the countries. Let's take an example of, suppose, in the context of maternal mortality only in the United States. Why I'm saying United States? Because we should believe that most of the maternal deaths would be handled by providing best of the medical care. And United States is a country which spends the most on the health as compared to any other countries globally. They would spend around 16-17% of GDP on their health, and obviously is expected to have the best of the medical care that is being provided to the population there. But when I ranked and looked at the ranking of maternal mortality across the globe, there are 60 countries, 62 precisely countries, who are performing better than United States in terms of maternal mortality. So just having a medical care and resources available is not the solution probably. We have to think around to see that what are the other factors which are also contributing, which might include social determinants, which also would require multi-sectoral interventions, which also contributes to the maternal mortality. It's not the only medical care probably would help us to bring down the maternal mortality. So the differences between the countries are very stark. In terms of any key indicators, it may be, I took an example of maternal mortality, it could be life expectancy, it could be malnutrition related indicators, it could be infant mortality rate. So the differences between the countries are important, but let's look at differences within the countries. Let's take an example of one of the wealthiest cities of the world, London. And in London, there are two areas. One area is the Harrison Night Bridge, and you cycle from that area to reach another area, which is Church Road in London Borough of Westminster, which is, you can just travel by 30 minutes of bicycling. And see the difference in the life expectancy of the males. It is 20 years. 20 years is the difference between life expectancy of two population groups in one of the wealthiest cities of the world. Same is the story in Baltimore, or same is the story in Washington, D.C., or Mexico City, or for that matter, Dhaka, or Delhi, or Mumbai. So global perspective point of view, we realize that there are stark and distinct differences as long as the key health indicators are concerned, and inequities are so prevailing. I took, like when I mentioned about this London life expectancy of 20 years for males difference, I took the life expectancy as an indicator because one can certainly argue that there is more to the life than just years that person has lived. But life expectancy is one of the very crude indicators globally being used as the best indicator to reflect on how well we are doing as a society, how well we are taking care of our own people as a society, and therefore it remains important and critical. Equity is a relative concept. And why I'm saying so, because when we looked at the national and within the country estimates or between the country estimates, on a lighter note, I don't know how many of you have read Jagdish Bhagwati is a very celebrated author and writes, an economist, and writes very brilliantly. It is one of the books on protectionism. And at the footnote, he wrote about an economist. And he writes there that economist's wife turned to the economist and asked him, "Honey, do you love me?" He says, "Relative to what?" So whole idea of equity basically is a relative concept. It is relative to the what is more important in the context of equity. Now let's ponder on some national perspective issues. Let's take example of our own country. A girl child born in Chhattisgarh or Madhya Pradesh is 5 times more likely to die in the first year of life as compared to a girl child born in Kerala, for that matter. So in a lottery of life in India, it matters where you are born. If you are born in Kerala as a daughter, the probability that you would survive in the first year of life is 5 times more as compared to if you're born somewhere in some state in northern India. You see the difference between infant mortality rate in rural and urban areas. The difference is of around 13 to 14 percentage points. In one district in Assam, the infant mortality rate is 37, and adjacent district, the infant mortality rate is 73. Just reverse the digits. Under 5 mortality, same is the story, 15 percentage points higher in scheduled tribe population in India as compared to the national average. If you look at the income quintiles and look at the immunization coverage in income quintiles, we would find that in the lowest quintile, lowest bottommost 20% of our Indian population, the immunization coverage is barely 45, 47%, as compared to the highest quintile, the topmost quintile, which is almost 87% or 88%. Poor has 35% less institutional deliveries than the rich. NFHS data, when we analyzed with the span of a decade of 2 waves, the first wave was 2005-6 and the second was 15-16, and looked at various anthropometric indicators like, for example, height to age and weight to height and weight to age and then weight to height, and look at the z-scores to look at the childhood related indicators for that matter. Except stunting, other childhood indicators, nutrition indicators, they declined faster in the 10 years period in the EAG states as compared to non-EAG states, is something again which actually highlights the disparities which are so prevalent in our own population. And why I'm saying this, that this decline over a period of time and these trends are important because changes in inequality are important to judge if the public health programs that we deliver through our public health systems are able to cater the needs of less advantaged population. And that remains the discourse and deliberations that they are important from that perspective. These inequalities are gaping, and therefore we are talking about the development odyssey when we do indeed have to worry about those left behind. Because current narratives, if you look at not only in India, globally also, everybody talks about the development odyssey of their country. But when we reflect on development odyssey, we will also have to reflect those who are left behind. And that's the integral principle of the social justice, where health equity is a very integral part of all. Dr. Martin Luther King tells us that of all the forms of inequality, injustice in healthcare is the most shocking and inhuman. And therefore, the discourse, deliberations, and disquisitions related to inequalities can't be like a salad. They should be the main part of our course. It should be in the front and center of all the public health discourse, deliberations, and disquisitions that would happening in the country. Moving forward, I also wanted to mention that it is not that the World Health Organization had come out with this theme. Our own national health policy in 2017, few years back, also highlighted the similar issues. It clearly articulates the need of addressing equity, and I have picked up exact verbatim sentences from the health policy. It talks about the overall averages are improving, but we need to look at remote and tribal areas where they continue to fare poorly. It also actually gives the example of fully immunized children in Odisha and talks about 45% in scheduled tribes versus 62% in the states. It also aligns with the numbers related to skilled attendance at birth and 26% versus 51%. Our national health policy also highlights equity as one of the key policy principles. And these are again the verbatim sentences I picked up. Reducing inequality would mean affirmative action to reach the poorest. It talks about minimizing disparities. It talks about greater investments and financial protection for the people who would suffer from the largest burden of the disease. Inequity in health, we can't turn a blind eye. We can't refuse to act. And therefore, we need to ponder on these 4 Ps: policies, programs, public spending priorities, and political will, which are critically important in advancing the equity is concerned. So, the message number one, if you ask me, is to build a fairer world, we will have to address inequities. I wanted to give you 4 messages, but at each message, I would like to, recommend you one of the books that you should read. This is The Idea of Justice, written by Amartya Sen. If somebody is more interested in learning about why need to we build a fairer world, would recommend you to read this book by the Amartya Sen, which talks about the whole idea of justice, focusing on inequities. Let's move on to the next issue. Achieving health equity will not happen by default. We all need to understand. We'll have to work together for it. We have to, if we intend to build a fairer and healthier world for everyone, then how do we do that? I wanted to propose 2 interventions for doing that. 2 levels of interventions, I would say. One is health system strengthening and another is multi-sectoral approaches. And 2 strategies, one is health assurance, another is sustainable developments. Now, let me ponder on this particular issue of the health system framework. Because the first intervention that is suggested is that we will have to focus on strengthening our health system. When we talk about the framework of health systems, we generally talk about the 6 building blocks: health service delivery, health workforce, health information systems, medical products, vaccines and technologies, health financing, leadership and governance. So these are the issues that we generally talk about when we talk about the health systems framework. Let's take an example of service delivery. And because a lot of IMA colleagues have joined, I would like to re-emphasize one of the issue of participation of the private sector in the health service delivery in this country. The total 70% of our outpatient care is provided by the private sector. Our 58% of inpatient care is provided by the private sector. 65% of our doctors do work in the private sector. 51% of the nurses and nursing professionals, they do work in the private sector. Total 61% of our total HRH works in the private sector. And therefore, leveraging private sector in responding to the public health challenges, including addressing equity, remains important. And from that point of view, when we talk about private sector, generally people talk about PPP model, that is public-private partnership, but that is 3PPP. I have a different acronym for that. When I say PPP, I would say private for public purpose. Because even the private sector is expected to play a public purpose in the context of the health sector. From that perspective, we need to address the health service delivery issues if we really wanted to address the inequities in the country. From infrastructure point of view, without infrastructure, we are realizing that our struggle for the hospital beds in India for the COVID-19, Nagpur city is experiencing worst of its times in the history. Why is that so? You know how much population that we harbor in India? We have 18% of the global population live in India. We harbor 18% of the population. But if there are 100 beds available globally, how many beds are there in India? Only 6. We have only 6% of the global beds, hospital beds in India, to cater to the need of 18% of the population. And that would not happen overnight. It will require systematic, strategic, conscious efforts for a decade together to build our infrastructure so that we are there. If we wanted to talk about human resources for health, I mentioned some of the indicators in the context of the private sector. The size of our health workforce is 5.7 million, which is practically half of China, out of which 4.19 million people are health workers or health professionals, I would say, and 1.47 million people in the health sector, like they are the support staff, like ambulance drivers and nursing professionals, the administrative staff and the receptionists and sweepers and other people who contribute too. We have 1.1 million allopathic doctors in India, but our doctor population ratio, we have one doctor per 1,200 population. I'm talking about allopathic doctors. Our ratio of nurses to allopathic doctors is 1 is to 1.7. Our third of human resources for health cater to the needs of our two-thirds of our rural population. Our density of the skilled health workforce in India is 25.7 per 10,000 population. What has been recommended as the three levels that WHO has recommended is somewhere 22.8, 34.5, and 59.4, where we are way to go there up to a level of the moderate level that is being recommended for a country like India is 34.5 is a challenge. Our Foxy tells us that we are shortage of 40% obstetricians in the country. The pediatricians tells us that IAP tells us that we are shortage of 50% pediatricians in the country. When we looked at data of our community health centers and rural hospitals and shortage of medical specialists there, we recognize that there is an 80% of the shortage of 80% posts are vacant across the country. Similar is the story of another building block illustratively if we wanted to talk about health financing for that matter. If you look at our own national health accounts and analyze the data, what we spend on our health is 3.8%, as compared to with other countries like European countries or India, or even the countries in our peer BRICS, like for example South Africa or Brazil for that matter. Out of which the government spending is around 1 to 1.1 to 1.2% of our GDP, which is half of Sri Lanka, fourth of China, and sixth of Thailand. We have to go a long way to go. And therefore, it has contributed to the out-of-pocket expenses to up to almost 68%. And now you would realize the condition of the poorer families in the context of COVID-19, if they wanted to get admitted in a private hospital, you can see the catastrophic expenditure that would contribute to. Because we all understand the risk may be equal for rich and poor, but the impact of anything is much more on poor as compared to the rich population that we have. On the right side diagram, you would see that therefore, equity wanted to be addressed as a hallmark. The people should be at the center stage of this whole health systems framework. This COVID-19 has certainly reminded us that the role of the community needs to be recognized and respected if we wanted to really advance the overall agenda of public health with focus on equities. An equitable and efficient health system cannot be developed without adequate public financing, which I just mentioned to you. Dr. Tedros tells us, we throw money at an outbreak, and when it's over, we forget about it and do nothing to prevent the next one. This is dangerously short-sighted and frankly difficult to understand if something has been told. And therefore, we need a smart health system. And what is that smart health system? The smart health system should have these characteristics: strong and sturdy, sustainable, vibrant, robust and resilient, agile, efficient, resource optimizing, effective, equity promoting, inclusive, empathetic, people-centric, responsive, technology driven, and culturally sensitive. And therefore, we will have to strategically invest in strengthening our health systems in India. We'll have to revisit our health systems architecture. We'll have to reanalyze our health challenges, re-articulate our public health priorities with focus on equity, and redesign new health systems for the 21st century. Unless we do that, and unless we learn the lessons that we have experienced from the COVID-19 pandemic, I think we will live with the same conditions over the decades and the period is concerned. And therefore, the message number 2 that I wanted to give to all of you is that we need to recreate systems that can anticipate, avert, attenuate, and abbreviate any health threat that, while dependably delivering all other needed health services with 3 E's: efficiency, equity, and economic prudence. And 3 C's: continuity, commitment, and compassion. And of course, where the quality and dignity remains the hallmark. Why I'm saying the quality and dignity? Because generally we talk about the quality of care and quality of health services. But unfortunately, at times we forget dignity is an outstanding noble characteristics in the context of the health systems. We either consider that as a part of the quality or we take it granted. At times, sometimes we learn very horrifying stories that the way our own people are being treated in the hospitals, particularly sometimes in public and even private sector, the dignity is questioned. We all are human beings and we need to respect we all as human beings. And therefore, For all as health professionals, what matters is that the duty that we discharge with dignity, determination, dedication, and distinction, and that will make all difference. And therefore, we will also have to advance, because for advancing any field, we need contribution of public intellectuals and public discourses. We'll have to engage with the public intellectuals to transform the public discourse that is happening in the context of public health with focus on equity, to propel the public health agenda where equity is at the center stage. And therefore, a strengthened public health sector must be the centerpiece of the new health systems architecture with enhanced access to the public accountability. That's the point number 2 that I wanted to mention. And this is The Price of Inequality by Joseph Stiglitz. This is another book which is on inequities. It's an extraordinary book written on inequalities and its impact globally. I would recommend you to read. Now, move on to the multi-sectoral interventions, because we all understand that what influences the health of the people. The health of the people is influenced by so many social determinants, which are beyond our health sector. Like, for example, water and sanitation, the air, the air pollution is there, the food that we consume, and then physical activity, and there are so many other parameters, both at personal front and societal front, influence the health, and that needs to be looked at, and which influences the health, which are those parameters needs to be looked at. How do we deal with that? Because achieving health equity requires removing obstacles to the health, such as, like, for example, poverty, discrimination, and their consequences. You cannot differentiate them with the health problems, because Professor Michael Marmot tells us the conditions in which people are born, grow, live, work, and age all have influence on our health. And from that perspective, we need to see that how do we engage ourselves in responding to these challenges. The WHO Commission on Social Determinants for Health tells us that we need to close these gaps of inequities globally in a generation. And they also go further forward to tell us that the question is not whether we have the knowledge and resources to accomplish this task, but the question is, do we have the intent and will to do that? Policies in other sectors are important too. Like, for example, if we impose a 20% tax on sugar-sweetened beverages, we will be able to prevent 11.2 million cases of overweight and some 1,000 cases of diabetes over a period of 10 years. So talking about the sugar tax, now, being in health sector, this is not possible unless we engage with the finance ministry. The power of policy for chronic disease prevention, for example, tobacco. Evidence is available from many countries globally where taxation, bans on advertisements, smoke-free policies, and health warnings are more effective in reducing the mortality and morbidity associated with the tobacco. This person, Sanjay Basu, who has modeled on Indian data, is a professor in the Stanford University. What he stated is that the smoke-free laws and increased taxation on tobacco products will help us basically in reducing heart attacks and strokes, and even WHO, World Bank, everybody says that. But the important is that the data that he has modeled tells us that if we implement smoke-free laws and tax on every tobacco product appropriately, we would be able to avoid and prevent 25% of the heart attacks and strokes during a period of 10 years that he had calculated in 2013 to 2022. And he also actually went on to tell us that this will have more impact than all the drugs that a cardiologist of this country would prescribe for. These are extraordinary examples. Like, for example, impact of taxation on cigarette sales in France and South Africa. This is another example of triple halt double, the tripling of cigarette prices, halved the consumption, and doubled the inflation adjusted government revenues. There's another paper in WHO Bulletin which tells us lower incidence of myocardial infarction after the smoke-free legislation was implemented in China. So there are multiple examples where it tells us that our engagement in the multi-sectoral engagement is important. Policy measures usually do not cost the government money, like, for example, tobacco taxes, bans on advertisement, public smoking bans, food labeling for that matter, the sugar and the salt content of the marketed food, regulation of the processed food, like, for example, salt and trans fats and others. And therefore, now, these are all measures beyond the health sector. But unless these measures are addressed too, we will not be able to advance the agenda. And then therefore, there is the involvement of other sectors. Like, for example, tobacco, you wanted to deal, you will have to engage with the agricultural ministry. We'll have to engage with the revenue ministry. We'll have to engage with the international organizations, education ministry, alcohol for that matter, the finance, regulatory mechanisms. There are multiple interventions in the context of nutrition and diet or physical activity, roads and urban development ministry, rural development ministries. Unless we engage with them, we will not be able to actually respond to these certain challenges. So message number 3 is health is also affected by several determinants which lie outside the conventional health sector, and public health requires multidisciplinary and multi-sectoral approaches and multi-layered approaches to deal with that. We will have to recalibrate, recraft, and reinvent public interventions which would help us to propel the agenda of reducing health inequities. And what Albert Einstein tells us is that we cannot solve our problems with the same level of thinking that created those problems. So we have to think outside the box. You cannot think of only the interventions which probably we have conceptualized and created in 20th century to address the challenge of 21st century. After message number 3, I would like to show you this Poor Economics by Abhijit Banerjee and Mr. Duflo, another third book, which probably would help us to understand equities in a better way that we wanted to read. The last few minutes that I actually wanted to summarize, last two important strategies wish to elaborate on is the health assurance and sustainable development. These are the key strategies which will help us to propel the agenda of inequities or addressing inequities. Of course, universal health coverage is very much part of the health assurance. And we all know that it talks about all people. When it talks about all people, it talks about addressing equity. When it talks about providing quality health services and providing a financial protection, it talks about basically the reducing inequities. So the core elements of the universal health coverage, all of the people, quality health services and financial protection actually address the equity. And therefore, to me, if you ask me and what health assurance is all about, it actually includes two important parts, is that financial protection and functioning health system, the smart health system that we talked about, because we would require a functioning health system, a smart health system to provide the quality health services to the population, and together that becomes the UHC. But universal health coverage is one thing. But in addition to that, if we are able to address the social determinants of the health, and then if we take that as a package, then probably we will be able to see that advance the agenda of health assurance. Because we all understand ensuring universal health coverage paves the path of the equity. And this very much aligned with the whole idea of the equity. The inequities are addressed as a part of the universal health coverage. But ensuring access and social determinants of the health remains most important. But further elaborating on health assurance, I would like to finally say that it has two words, health and assurance. It is the assurance about the health to the people of this country. And what kind of health? The health they dream, desire, deserve, and demand, because we live in a democratic society. Having moved further forward, if you look at these sustainable development goals, you would find clearly even the inequities are included as independent goals here. Like for example, goal number 10, you can see reduced inequalities. Goal number 5, you can see gender inequalities. And even, for example, the first two indicators, like for example, no poverty and zero hunger, basically are goals addressing inequities. Because who suffer the poverty? Who suffer the hunger? Even the good health and well-being also for that matter, quality education, sustainable cities and communities, clean water and sanitation. The whole idea of sustainable development goals also is to actually address the challenges in the context of equity. So the message number 4, the fourth message that I wanted, the final message that I wanted to give it to you is health assurance provides us an opportunity to address equity and improve the health of our people. We have to advance the agenda of health assurance for moving towards the sustainable development goals. And this is the fourth book, which is on global inequality, written by Branko Milanovic. It's an extraordinary book. And, I have read this book 2 times at least. And I would recommend that if it is possible for you, these are the 4 books I have kept in my own personal library, tells us all about the whole idea of social justice and inequities and how integrated it is in the fabric of our life. So to conclude, let's build a fairer, healthier world for everyone. What we will have to do is that if we do that, and if we address inequities, we will be able to create Swasth Bharat along with Swachh Bharat and Sashakta Bharat. Thank you so much.